the sixth day of mourning in the city of Rome as Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery of the Doctrine of Faith, celebrates Mass in St. Peter's for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tara Mergener. As the Church celebrates the feast day of St. Joseph the Worker, Cardinal Fernandez remembers Pope Francis as a man who always saw the dignity of work.
Because for Pope Francis, work expresses and nourishes the dignity of the human person. It permits him to develop his capacities. It helps him to grow relationships, helps him to feel himself to be a collaborator of God by taking care in improving this world.
And today we are within 1 week at the start of the conclave. The cardinals did not meet today as they usually do because it's Labor Day in Italy, but preparations are still underway as the Church moves closer to the election of her next Holy Father. Joining us now from Rome is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President of EWTN News. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Bunson, we are just 6 days away now from the start of the conclave, and though the world will be watching, it's a very secretive affair. In fact, the Apostolic Constitution that set the rules for the conclave says there must be no violation of secrecy. So how is that maintained?
Well, they take the secrecy of the proceedings very, very seriously, and they do it in two different ways. The first is very practically. The Sistine Chapel, the Casa Santa Marta, will be swept for possible bugs, for listening devices. You can imagine there are a lot of countries all over the world that have a keen interest in what the cardinals are talking about and certainly how they're reaching their decisions. So that type of security is in place. And of course, the cardinals themselves have to surrender all of their own electronic devices. So there are no phones or anything like that in the conclave either. And then there's the more personal side. Each cardinal at the start of the conclave takes an oath of secrecy. The reason for that is to maintain really the security of their deliberations so that they know that they can speak freely. And so this oath is considered very important to the point, in fact, where if you violate it and those who participate in the conclave or help it who take the same oath, you could be subject to excommunication.
Wow, serious business for sure. So a lot of people are also wondering, what will it be like behind the Vatican walls? Will the cardinals have any downtime, for example?
Well, for the cardinals, the schedule is fairly regular. They're going to have Mass, especially once the voting starts. They have Mass. They're staying at the Casa Santa Marta, or the Vatican guest house, or technically it's called the Domus Sancta Marta in Latin. So they're going to be going from basically two places, the Casa Santa Marta, where they're living sort of in seclusion, to the Sistine Chapel every day. Now, they have time for lunch, and then in the evenings, after the second vote is taken of the day, they are free to spend their time. And much of it is spent in prayer, contrary to what movies sometimes try to show or claim. The cardinals actually pray together a great deal of their time. But then in the evenings especially, they have a chance to talk to each other, to get to know each other, and to continue that assessment of who they really do think should be the next pope.
So interesting. Well, let's move on to the election itself. How will the cardinals cast their votes?
Yes, well, the cardinals, in a ceremony that dates back many, many centuries, and in fact, the basic rules that govern the conclave date back all the way to 1274 when the conclave system was introduced. That itself is a very long and colorful history. But each morning twice and each afternoon twice until they actually elect a pope, they will do votes. And lots are drawn. You'll have scrutineers, you'll have revisers. So a very thorough system of checking each vote is taken. Each cardinal writes the name of the person he thinks should be pope, places it into a very large, sometimes a chalice, sometimes a receptacle, and then that itself is emptied as vote after vote is tallied. And each vote after it's done is pierced with a needle and thread, and they're all tied together so that there's no possible accident. It sounds very old school. Well, it's old school, but it also really works.
Well, lastly, as you know, much of Rome is closed today because it's May 1st and Italy's Labor Day, but it's also the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker. So what's it about that the 2 days coincide? What can you tell us?
Well, they coincide partly because Pope Pius XII, back in the 1950s, wanted to do two things. He wanted to honor St. Joseph in another way. And we honor St. Joseph, of course, as one of the great patron saints of workers. He holds a lot of titles, of course. He's the patron of the Universal Church. He's the terror of demons. But this day is dedicated to him as a master craftsman, as a carpenter, but also as a hardworking person. And Pius was very much aware of the threat of communism and other atheistic tendencies. And a lot of them celebrated, of course, May Day, which is one of the international days for communists. And to sort of offset that, he dedicated this day to St. Joseph the Worker. And as Pope Francis always said, if you want to solve a problem, go to St. Joseph. And so here today, we honor St. Joseph and we honor all workers.
Wow, so much insight, so much knowledge. Dr. Bunson, thank you so much for keeping us informed of what's going on over there. So interesting and amazing times.
Great to be with you, and let's keep praying for our cardinals.
Absolutely.